Today we're going to look at songbooks, and in particular songbooks which would have been more common around churches of Christ in the Tennessee area. But before we do that, I'd like to point out that this video today is dedicated to my dad. He was a song leader, and he taught others how to be a song leader. He was at one time the choral director at Lipscomb University, and also he was into other genres of music, such as early music, which would be Renaissance and medieval music, or jazz vocal ensemble. He also took an interest in world music. Today is February 11th, 2020, and this is the 10th anniversary of when he passed away. There is a website dedicated to him at drgeraldmoore.com, where we're going to have some photo, audio, and different remembrances to him. Now let's take a look at some songbooks. We're going to start with something obscure today. This is called Songs of Hymns of Praise and Power. And I'm showing this off because this was songs written by Tom Holland. And he was a well-known preacher of the Church of Christ Brotherhood. He did pass away in 2019, but my dad helped him on this songbook, and in the 80s I went to the congregation where he preached, so this one is particularly meaningful to me for that reason. I believe all of the songs in the songbook were actually composed by Tom Holland, so I'm not sure that I have ever sung any of these anywhere, but that does make it particularly interesting, to me anyway. Next up, we're going to take we have Praise for the Lord. Now, it seems like pretty much any Church of Christ that has purchased new songbooks in the last 3 years, in the last 25 years or so, focus on 3 particular songbooks. The first of these is Praise for the Lord. One of them is by Taylor Publishing, and for whatever reason, I've never actually been to a congregation that uses that one, but this one is also special to me because this one was, the editor was John Wiegand, someone else that my dad worked with. My dad worked a lot on this songbook. It originally came out around 1994. And if you had the original version of this, they made about a 100-song supplement of it, which came with more of the modern devotional songs. But the 1997 version includes all of these songs in the back. So this one, like I say, is something that you see fairly often in the Church of Christ today. Next up, for another common book that we see in the Church of Christ, will be Songs of Faith and Praise. This particular one belonged to my father-in-law, but this one was the final songbook by Alton H. Howard. This one was originally published in 1994, and so a lot of congregations, including the congregation where I attend today, all use this songbook. That was the replacement for Songs of the Church 21st Century Edition. I'll get back to that one in a moment, but that was the sequel to Songs of the Church. Now, growing up in the 1980s, it seemed like everybody had this songbook, and all 3 that I've just shown here were from Alton H. Howard. This one was published in originally 1971, and this particular printing was from 1977. Just as kind of a piece of trivia, Howard Publishers were in West Monroe, Louisiana. That is today better known as the home of Duck Dynasty, and I believe one of Alton Howard's granddaughters is Corey Robertson, who is married into that Duck Dynasty family. But one thing that this particular songbook was known for was the 10 Commandments that were on the right here in the front. Things that you should not do, which would abuse a songbook. I think everyone's particular favorite was number 4, thou shalt not use me to hit the babies. And so that one was replaced by the Songs of the Church 21st Century Edition. I only know of one congregation that used this. It also happened to be the congregation I grew up, Creve Hall, happened to use these, and I don't know of a lot of people that used it, but I have personally used it before in the past. Next up, we're going to look at church gospel songs and hymns. This is another one from the late 70s, early 80s. Once again, the congregation I attended in the 1980s used this particular songbook, and this one was published by Victor E. Howard, who was the brother of Alton H. Howard. So the family must have had a songbook competition running between them, I suppose. And so I tend to remember this song was had a lot of what I would consider barbershop quartet type songs, but whatever works. It has a lot of the old classics as well. The songbooks when they used these at Creve Hall, when they were done with them, they actually donated their about 1,000 songbooks or so to the Diana Singing. And so if you've ever been to the Diana Singing in the past 30 years or so, you've probably used one of the yellow versions of this, which was originally at Creve Hall. Next up, I'm going to go back in time a little bit further to Sacred Selections for the Church. This one was published by Ellis Crum in the late 50s and early 60s. Looking for a date on here. Originally 1956. This one was printed in 1960. And if there was any doubt that this was specifically intended for the Church of Christ, song number 1 in the book is titled The Church of Christ. I'm not sure that I've ever particularly heard this song, but one thing this song has a reputation for is Mr. Crum tended to change some of the songs that were in them. A famous example would be a song that most of us know as When We All Get to Heaven. He changed it to When the Saved Get to Heaven. So if you think about it, he's saying that that's a big assumption that everyone who's ever singing this song is all going to heaven. You can't really say that everyone singing the song is going to heaven. So to be safe, we're going to change that to When the Saved Get to Heaven. And if nothing else, it makes for an interesting topic, but there are apparently several songs in this particular songbook that kind of work are along that line of thinking. Next, we'll take a look at a couple of songbooks from the Gospel Advocate Company. Now, they did make a songbook in the 50s. I have it somewhere. It was an elder from our congregation, Brian, found it for me at a Goodwill, I believe, and I can't find it today. But going back in time a little bit further, we have here Christian Hymns 3, and kind of difficult to read here. At the top it says Psalms, Hymns, and Spiritual Songs. This particular copy apparently was at one time in use at Freed-Hardeman, which at the time was college, as I guess that is the Freed-Hardeman alma mater there printed on the insert. This particular copy was produced by the Gospel Advocate. It says has their information here in the front cover. Copyright 1966. The editor was L.O. Sanderson. I recognize that name from multiple songs in our songbooks. Looking at something even older than that, we have Christian Hymns. This one belonged to someone named Brother Brewer II. Christian Hymns for Every Purpose in Worship. Again, the editors were L.O. Sanderson, and I believe that's Clay Polius, with Mr. Hardiman as an associate editor. Issued only in shape notes with durable binding. This one was printed in 1935. Something a little bit more modern. Found this at a local bookstore. Glorious Praise from the Colonies. And so this is going to be mostly modern songs from the Church of Christ at the Colonies. Glorious Praise. Songs of praise and worship. And that is out in Amarillo. And so, again, this is going to be mostly, the copyright 2005, it's going to be mostly modern songs in here. I went to college at where my dad taught, since that gave me the college discount. That was Lipscomb University. And when I was a student there, our chapel had some older song books, but for the modern songs, someone had printed the words to the many of the popular devotional songs of that time. Of course, not really a fan of the songbooks that are only the words, but it's a whole lot easier to print them off that way. I didn't just steal this when I graduated from college. I waited until they were no longer using them, and then I happened to find a copy. Everything I'd shown up to this point was specifically for the Church of Christ. Now I'm going to go through some older songbooks, which were not made for a specific religious group in mind, or if they were, I just don't know which group that was. And we're going to start with Gospel Leader of James Vaughn. He was a well-known songbook publisher in Lawrenceburg, and if you go to the Lawrenceburg Town Square today, there is actually a mural painted in honor of James Vaughn. This one looks like something must have eaten a hole inside of it, but a gospel leader for Sunday schools, singing schools, revivals, conventions, and general use in Christian worship. This was published in 1942. This cost 35 cents when it originally came out, or $3.60 for a dozen. This one's called Manila Binding. I guess that means it just has a staple that goes through the binding on that. Next up, I have 3 songs from Roadheaver Company. This one is called Victory Songs. It's kind of well worn here. Interesting how it has the cloth binding, or the cloth cover on here. You don't see that on modern books. So this is Victory Songs for the Church, Sunday School, and Evangelistic Services. And this one has a publication, well, it says orchestrated for 15 instruments, so that was not designed for the Church of Christ, but looking for a, there does not appear to be a date printed on here, but it does point out the Roadheaver Company was prints in Chicago and Philadelphia. Next up, we have Songs for Service. And there is a little song printed on top of a cloud here in the top corner. Every cloud will wear a rainbow if your heart keeps right. I do not know what song that came from, but again, we have a cloth cover on it. Songs for Service for the Church, Sunday School, and Evangelistic Services. And then we have Christian Service Songs, third from Roadheaver. This time it's called the Roadheaver Hall-Mack Company, copyright 1939. And with the option of artistic waterproof cloth binding or heavy Bristol paper. Since this one is not cloth, I'm going to assume that is the heavy Bristol paper. And it looks like we had something glued onto the front cover of this one for a while. For a different publisher, we have Sacred Service Hymns. The binding on this one is about to go out. This one was originally belonged to the East Hickman Baptist Church. For general use in all religious services, this was produced by R.E. Winsett Music of Dayton, Tennessee. If you go to the Ray County Courthouse in Dayton, Tennessee, which was much more famous for being the home of the Snopes trial, they have a little bit of museum with local interest on the bottom floor, and they even had a small selection of Winsett Music songbooks there, which I was not expecting when I found that. But Sacred Service Hymns, there was a date in Roman numerals on the last page. If I can turn there without doing any more damage to the book here, we have a year of 1946. Next we have another Great Songs of the Church. This one is very different than the other one that we had for the choir of the Havilands Friends Church. A treasury of 600 sacred songs suitable for all services of the church, compiled by E.L. Jorgensen of Standard Publishing of Cincinnati, Ohio. This is volume number 2, the New Alphabetical Hymnal. Here is our forward. And do we have anything else here? Copyright again in Roman numerals 1937. Made in the USA. This one has a red stickers, which means I paid 10 cents for this at a local thrift store. The Songs of Praise by the Charles Thompson Evangelistic Crusades of Hardy, Arkansas. Never heard of this person at all, but we've got some more, we've got some classic songs that are just the words, none of the notes, and only not even 100 songs in that one. Next we have Living Above, Songs and Choruses, compiled by F. Carlton Booth. 1947, W.B. Eardsman Publishing Company of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And this is a fairly small book. There's about 50 songs in that one. This one looks, I'm going to guess this one is 60s or 70s. Sing Praises to Jehovah certainly feels a lot newer than some of the others that we've been looking for. That kind of watercolor scene right there makes me think it looks like a pew Bible that you would find in most congregations. This one is, even newer than I thought, 1984, published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York. This was a almost small enough to, well, not quite fit in your pocket, but that's a much smaller book than a lot of these others. Next we have From the Cross to the Crown, published by the Quartet Music Company of Fort Worth, Texas. Again, we have kind of a staple binding on this one. The same kind of easy to wrinkle cloth or cover to it. From the Cross to the Crown, Scriptural Songs by the Thomas S. Cobb and Elder T.B. Clark. This one had a price of 40 cents per copy. Published in Fort Worth, Texas, 1921. We have Choice Collections by M. Homer Cummings, publisher of Wheeling, West Virginia. This originally belonged to someone named Mildred. A special selection of sacred songs with brief sketches of the leading authors, compiled by John T. Benson and Homer Cummings. This was, again, 35 cents. Don't see a year on this one, but says, okay, here it says we have some biographical sketches of, let's see, for instance, H.L. Gilmore. Information about him there. Next book is Gems for Jesus. A great collection of the best sacred songs for church, Sabbath, schools, conventions, and the home. Edited by J.H. Pinnell. This is by Samuel W. Beasley. I feel like I've heard that name before, as the author of some of our songs, and George W. Sides. Send all orders to the Stanley Gardner Company, as well as a few other publishers listed all on here. The Golden Book of Favorite Songs. This one is a really thin songbook, but has an excellent, almost feels like a leather binding on this one. Let's see, revised and enlarged by Holland McCreary Company of Chicago. A treasury of the best songs of our people. 202 songs, 192 are of which are with music. So I guess that means there are some only words. In the back here, has a table of contents on the front, including a classified index there on the front. And so one thing I noticed is not all of the songs in this one are religious songs. Many of them are, but for instance, we have Yankee Doodle, and gives kind of a history of Yankee Doodle. Different words than what I'm familiar with, so I wonder if even the notes are the same on that one. That's kind of interesting to find. Some of the songs in here are religious. That even might be an advertisement in the back. It says a well-made book, and I agree with that. It's an excellent shape, being this much further here. A new low-priced glee and chorus book. A wonderful book for a low price. Something a little bit older, we have Songs of Faith and Triumph, 1, 2, and 3 combined, so it's still as big or small as some of the other books that we've had, so these would have been really tiny if it had just been each of the three had been separated out. This one was stamped as the South Orange Methodist Episcopal Sunday School. Compiled by J. Lincoln Hall, C. Austin Miles, Dr. Adam Geibel, and B.D. Ackling. Contents: the best gospel songs, new selections, familiar hymns of consecration, invitation, and for general use in all religious meetings. The best copyrights of other publishers and responsive readings. This was produced by the Hallmark Company Publishers of Philadelphia with a date of 1929, printed in the USA. So we start with Come to the Garden Alone, and then The Old Time Religion. Now for the oldest song book in my collection here, we have The Finest of the Wheat, Volume 2. Hymns, new and old. Of course, they're now all old, but for missionary and revival meetings and Sabbath schools, edited by George D. Elderkin, John R. Sweeney, C.C. McCabe, William J. Kirkpatrick, F.A. Hardin. Printed in New York, Cincinnati, Chicago, St. Louis, Philadelphia, by R.R. McCabe and Company Publishers. And so this one also has a price of 35 cents per copy. One thing I noticed in here, we've got the original owner, O.M. Connor, wrote his name that looks like with a fountain pen. Has a date here of 1895. I thought it said 1893 earlier, but on the next page I saw where it was actually copyrighted in, or printed in 1894. That's what it says up there. One other thing I thought was interesting about the cover here was it must have been sold by from A.D. Lemon Druggist. So to think that you would go into a drugstore and purchase a songbook, and my, how times have changed. But here again we have the front cover. This is the 14th edition. Preface here. Notes, or notice, the words and music of nearly every piece in this book are copyright property and cannot be reprinted in any form without the permission of the owners. For the preface, we have a chorus choir of more than 600,000 voices attest the marvelous popularity of the finest of the wheat, number 1. The editors cannot hope to surpass that book, but there is a very loud call for one of equal merit in Finest of the Wheat, number 2. We have it. We sent it forth believing it to be a worthy successor of number 1. That is all the commendation it needs. From its pages we believe the grand chorus choir of number 1 and many thousands more in camp meetings, revival meetings, social meetings, missionary meetings, and Sabbath schools will soon be chanting the praises of the King, written by the editors. So our first song is More About Jesus, so a song which was quite new back then. It was only 7 years old, but we still sing it today, and a testament to that song, Since I Have Been Redeemed. But here's a song that I'm not particularly familiar with, Can a Boy Forget His Mother? I'm going to flip through some of here. Throw Out the Lifeline, Though Your Sins Be as Scarlet. So we have a Fannie J. Crosby song that is still sung today. Blind Bartimaeus, not familiar with that one. Scattering Precious Seed, Showers of Blessing. There is a Hand Held Out, Go Tell the World of His Love. So we've got a quite a selection here of songs that I am not familiar with. So it's kind of interesting to read through here and see a lot of the songs that people are not familiar with anymore. Cleanseth White as Snow. In the back of the book, looks like we have some songs where it just gives you the first few notes of the song just to get you started, and then just the words, because I guess they feel like you probably already know the words of these. So like Standing on the Promises is still sung today. In the middle of that we have number 280, which seems a little bit out of place because they have the full notes to that one. Redeemed, How I Love to Proclaim It. We've heard a joyful sound, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. I found the friend in Jesus, he's everything to me, with the Lily of the Valley, Jesus, lover of my soul. Kind of obscure today, but still a few people know it. See, Bringing in the Sheaves. God Be With You Till We Meet Again. That still sung a little bit. So we have an index here in the back. He should have fed them also with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock should I have satisfied thee. Psalms 81:16. So that's where this songbook gets its name. I spent a little bit more time with this one since it is the oldest one of the collection. Next up, I have another modern songbook, the Celebration Hymnal, Songs for Hymns and Worship. This one, Faith Evangelical Church, containing scriptures from the King James Version of the Bible. This was printed by Word Music Integrity Music, copyright 1997. Then we have the Baptist Hymnal. By Convention Press of Nashville. Copyright 1991. This is the third printing. So this is the Sunday School Board of the Southern Baptist Convention. Lloyd Elder, president of that. So that is going to be a Baptist book. Here's a quite a small one called Songs and Meditations for the Rest of the Way, written and compiled by Bill Boyle. Circulation manager of the Moody Bible Institute of Chicago. Copyright 1969. And that green printing would certainly get on my nerves if I had to look at that too long. I'm not sure that I see anything in this book that I know. Next we have choir favorites, inspiring songs for volunteers and rally choirs, one of the Sing-Spiration series. Someone had handwritten the word winter in the top corner here, and we have ads for other books in the series. Zondervan Publishing House of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And this one was sold by the Christian Supply Center, which was stamped right here. And copyright 1954 by Alfred B. Smith. Master, the Tempest is Raging. Now the Day is Over, Send the Light. Now, I've heard of this next group. I'm not particularly certain who these people are. The Cokesbury Worship Hymnal. There is a stamping of, I guess that is a steeple of a church building, kind of actually stamped into the front of the book there. C.A. Bowen, D.D., General Editor, from the Methodist Publishing House. And for the more liturgical groups out there, there is an Order of Worship number 2, actually printed on the as listed as song number 1 on here, followed by an invocation sentence. I have another Cokesbury hymnal here. This one is unfortunately falling apart on me. The staples on this are just rusting out, and the pages are falling out, so I'm not going to flip through this one. But music editor Harold Hart Todd, by the Cokesbury Press in Nashville. Next we have Select Church Songs from Stamps-Baxter. We'll talk about them a lot more here in just a moment. Copyright 1965. This one is spiral bound, the only spiral bound book of the whole collection here, compiled by Ma Baxter and Viday Polk. For something a little bit different, here is something that I found at Goodwill called the Little Golden Book of Hymns. And when I think of Little Golden Book, I think of the Pokey Little Puppy or the monster at the end of this book. But at one time, it must have been quite all right to make children's Christian songs in a Little Golden Book. And so I thought this was kind of interesting, all of these children's songs, and it's also newer than I thought it would be with 1985 on here. And so some nice illustrations go with it. A prayer for help. This is the day. I looked at this earlier. The words seem familiar, but the notes do not. The creation. All Things Bright and Beautiful. I would have never thought of that as a child's song. So I thought that was an interesting pickup. And then in the children's genre, we have one more. We have Dottie Rambo's Down by the Creek Bank anniversary and 25th edition. And I didn't remember this when it came out, but there was a sequel to it. I think it was called something like Back at the Creek Bank, that my dad knew someone who knew someone that worked on that, and gave me a copy of it, and I listened to that cassette a lot as a child. But this one is songs written by Dottie Rambo, who is, a lot of you are probably familiar with, published by Benson music publishing in Brentwood, Tennessee. So I think this was mostly for children's choruses, so you could teach a lot of your kids how to sing some of these songs for if you wanted to have a special service there at your congregation. Now I'm going to take a moment and talk about some Stamps-Baxter songs here for just a minute. As you can see, I have several of them here. I found a box at Goodwill or something like that. I forgot exactly where I found it, but they had all of these all together in one purchase. I probably wouldn't have purchased all these if it wasn't a good price to get the whole set, but generally speaking, what these are going to be songbooks that are for quartets or so. Not really sure that any of these would be good to be used by a congregation. This one dates back to 1944. And the way I understand it is you might be familiar with some of the songs that are called Stamps-Baxter songs in our modern songbooks. But what they were at the time as publishers, what they would do is if you wanted to get your song published, there was a pretty good chance that you could get it in the Stamps-Baxter songbook. And if they did publish your song, you would get a modest check. And when I say modest, it probably was about $5–10 to get your song published, which people were doing that for the bragging rights, not because it paid well. And so people essentially gave away their songs for free by having it published in the Stamps-Baxter songbooks. But it got their works out there, and I'm sure a lot of people wanted to get a couple songs in here just to add to their resume, or just because they could. And so going through some of these, Crimson Glow, we've got Golden Songs of Praise. The Stamps-Baxter people used that formula for several decades, the gospel ship, and just made book after book after book. And when I flip through some of these, many of them are songs I have never heard of before. There's probably one that every once in a while a song would make it big, would be included in even today's songbooks. But I would think most of the books that are, or the songs that are in here, are just kind of one-offs. You're not going to see them anymore. But if there was something that became popular, well, Stamps-Baxter still owns the rights to it, and if it makes it into our songbooks today, Stamps-Baxter still probably has the rights to it. And they would also sprinkle in about 5 old royalty-free songs that were old enough that they could print off for free. And as you can tell, I have a whole stack of these books right here. And they're interesting covers, just to see what they were coming up with here. And so now that we're near the end of my songbooks here, I'm probably never going to add anything else to this collection unless something nice just happens to come in. I have completely filled one shelf on my bookshelf, and anything else is just not going to fit anymore. So I've got a couple copies of the Harbor Bells here. So thanks for looking at my songbooks. One last thing I'll leave you with is after this video, I'm going to link to a couple of videos that I posted on my YouTube channel many, many years ago. One of them is me leading at the Diana scene. That was a scary experience, but something that I am glad to have said I could do. I might never do it again, but I'm not as good as a lot of the song leaders that are happen to be there. And then I'm also going to link to a couple of videos of Dad's chorus groups performing some of their songs. And so hope you will check out a couple of my dad's songs, and as I honor him on the 10th anniversary of his passing. Thanks for watching. Bye.